So we're reading from Luke 18, which is on page 1052, the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector. To some who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everyone else, Jesus told this parable. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you that I am not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and give 1/10 of all I get. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. This is the word of the Lord.
I'm going to invite Chris up. I'm going to pray for him. Please give him a big clap for being a legend. Oh, Jesus, we just thank you so much for Chris. Holy Spirit, anoint him now to speak your words to us and impart his wisdom to us. Lord, I just pray that his message would encourage us and challenge us to grow closer to you and your heart and your ways. Amen.
Good evening, everyone. It is Luke 18. That's heart palpitations in a way in which I don't really want to experience on a Sunday night when I've got a dissertation due in a month's time. Tonight we are continuing with our Luke series. It's been a great series so far. It's been fantastic to hear the different speakers. And today we're going to be continuing on with this passage that we have. And I want to ask you this question. Who goes home right with God? It's a big, bold question. Who goes home right with God? And we can see in this passage the answer already. The clue's already there. But in terms of how we're going to get into this story, how we're going to understand it from the cultural perspective, how we're going to understand it in today's context, and then what does that mean for us in our lives? So we're going to picture the scene. It's time to go to the temple, guys. You know, it might be 9 o'clock in the morning. Some of you might be asleep if you're students. It might be 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Might still be asleep if you're students. You never know. But it's time to go. This is the place that was the cultic, the ethnic, political, and the economic center of Israel. And it was the epicenter of worship and prayer. So you go to the temple. This is a big deal. So the preferred posture inside the culture at this time is slightly different to what we're used to. So normally in our culture, you know, when we say like, please sit or kneel to pray. But actually it was very common to stand, very common to have your hands raised. It was very common to be able to like actually be expressive with how that you're going to be praying. So, and then this is where the parable is set. It's set inside this context. So like, you know, the fact is we might not feel comfortable raising our hands at times, but in here, people are raising their hands. We see the Pharisee, you know, would have been dressed in a certain way. It would have been very easy to identify the Pharisee, who the Pharisee is, what do they do? If inside the Jewish culture, these people were known, they were respected, they were devout. You know, they were committed to studying and obeying the law, a high position that for the most part respected and admired. This person would have been honored wherever they went. People would have looked up to them because of how they approached the Holy Scriptures, how they tried to understand the Scriptures, the teaching that they did. So these people were people who were respected inside this culture. So there's the Pharisee, standing alone, not because he doesn't have any friends, but because of the fact that he wants to be distanced from the sinners, wants to be distanced from the people over there. One that doesn't want to be contaminated by them. And what we hear the Pharisee say is echoed of Psalm 26. The prayer that says, "Vindicate me, Lord, for I have led a blameless life. I have trusted the Lord and have not faltered. Test me, Lord, and try me. Examine my heart and my mind." Psalm 26 says that, which is very similar to what we hear the Pharisees say here. Say, God, thank you that I am not like other people. robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector, I fast twice a week and give a tenth of all that I get. They're saying, because it's like, actually, we're hearing that now, and you're thinking, what a gloater. Like, you're just bragging about everything that you've done. Oh, look how special you are, Mr. Pharisee. Was that just me? Maybe. So you're thinking this. You're thinking, oh, what's this person saying is, as actually, oh, I don't like that. But like I said, in this culture, this is what he was supposed to do. This is what would have been understood. It would have been common practice. They're expected to keep the commandments. They're expected to keep them more than anyone else. The Pharisees' piety and their devotion is expected to exceed the Torah's teaching. He self-diagnosed himself as doing more than what was expected, with the words, twice as much. Whatever you say, I will do twice as much. In theory, he's not going to be put down for this. He's not going to be looked down. It's like someone being honored and celebrated for their accomplishments and what they've done, like someone who's given to charity and had their name on a plaque. In the culture, this wasn't wrong, what they were doing, what they were saying. It was no less praiseworthy in this culture to a Jewish audience. This was standard. This was common. The listeners of this parable would have thought, this guy's done nothing wrong. He's set apart from us. He's done his time. He's studied. Respect. Hats off to you. You've done a great job. And then walks in the second man, tax collector. Now, my accountant is actually a pretty good person. I actually quite like my tax collector, the one who actually sorts out so that everything's in order, who likes order and doing things. But actually, inside this culture, this isn't exactly how that they were received, because they were standing at a distance from the Pharisee. And while the Psalm 26 might have been what the Pharisee was echoing, Psalm 51 is what the tax collector was echoing. Have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing love. And according to your great compassion, blot out my transgressions. You see, the tax collector, the traitor, someone who is working for Rome. The people occupying, they've changed the status quo, so the fact that the Jewish people cannot thrive and succeed. Not someone who's looked down at in a way in which that they were looked down at. They were not someone to admire. Very different posture from how this person's standing. If the Pharisee is here, look at me. The tax collector is here. Look at me. And not here, but as far away from the high altar as they could be, because they can't stand to be in the presence of that, because they know of their iniquity. They know of their great sin. They recognize that. And the posture that this person is taking up is a posture of sorrow and contrition. What is he doing? Now we look at verse 13. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven. Couldn't look up. And what did he do? Did he tap his breast? I'm such a sinner. He's beating his breast. There is a sorrow and an anguish within inside this person being that is recognizing a pain and a hurt in what they have done, in who they are. And what do they say? God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Have mercy on me, a sinner. Another interpretation could be seen like this: Lord, cover up what I have done. What is there not from the tax collector? A load of justification-based language of, no, I did this because, I had to. I had to feed my family. There's not excuses running through his being. There's not a way in which they're going about it that basically means it's okay what that person has done. No, their posture is of complete dependence on mercy and grace. Beating the chest. Looking down. Not able to look in the eye. Two very different characters that Jesus is painting for us in this parable. In the parable just before, we learn of the bad judge who is convinced to do something. And then we look at this one, and at the end, there is justice and vindication for the other. There is justification, because actually what Jesus is doing here is something really remarkable, and it's quite scandalous. And if the listeners really heard this and understood this, he was putting himself in the place of the high priest, the one who is able to say who is worthy, the one who is justified. It's a relationship this person is having that enables man to be in touch with God. And it's a contrasting attitude as well as to how to engage with God. At the end of the second parable, we read these most beautiful words. This man, the tax collector, is going home justified. It's a complete culture shift to what was expected. It's a complete different understanding of what has been happening inside Jewish culture. You see, going back to the Pharisee to the public had done nothing wrong, like I've already said, meeting the expectation. And when we look at our own culture, where do we see this kind of behavior? We justify ourselves constantly by morality, politics, virtue, social causes, but how easily that pride blinds us and how comparison enslaves us. The world promotes success and achievement, leaving others feeling like they don't measure up. I might have spent more than 5 minutes doom scrolling today, and I definitely came away feeling unworthy because other people are succeeding. Or maybe I came away going, I'm not like them. Comparing. There is that sense of false humility. Because actually I recognize what I've done, but look at them. Look what that person's done. Look, they're not quite, doing it right, but I am. See, comparison is poisoning our relationships with each other. Not just within inside our families, but within inside our friends, inside the different denominations in the church community. Disputes all around is causing division. It's causing us to look and judge one another, comparing one another. But any believer whose pride is in their own righteousness, then compared in contempt to others, is guilty of the same thing. We're guilty of judging others against our own standard, because it's our standard. See, the value that God honors are those whereby we look at ourselves in light of who he is, not through the distortion that comes from comparing ourselves to others. I mean, if I was to say to you, who's a really good judge of character in this place? At times I've thought I've been a good judge of character. At times people have thought they probably had a good judgment of character based on me, and it's not worked out maybe the way they thought it was going to. How often is it that the smooth talker ends up the snake, while the apparent simple person often ends up being the one full of integrity? It shows the condition of the human heart where we compare ourselves to others, because humility is rare in our society. Mainly because you can't talk about being humble, because then that will make you not humble. I'm such a humble person, guys. It just doesn't work like that. Humility isn't something that you talk about. It's something that you do. It's something that who you are. And we often approach God not based on mercy and grace, but via a track record, suggesting that he owes us a response. Don't let pride blind us as to how we actually stand before God. Because when we look at the Pharisee, he made it competitive by summarizing his own actions. And one thing that I know for sure is that God humbles the proud. I can speak from testimony from that. What he was doing was telling God what he was doing. He wasn't really talking to God. He was telling God his accomplishments. And as a result, now you reward me. Because I've done these things, come on, do your job. I've done what I've had to do. See, the Pharisee mentions God, but he's not talking. He's resting on his own self-diagnosis. And then when we meet Jesus in this story. The way in which he's painting this story is that he's telling us this parable by flipping the script. He flips the other. Because what we read about is the Pharisee is saying, I'm not like the others. That's who he's saying, I'm not like them. But actually, by the end of the story, the Pharisee is the other. And that would have been a really hard thing to have heard. If there was any Pharisees listening, they definitely would have found that hard to hear. Because Jesus is addressing the issue of pride. And Jesus here is telling us a unique prayer, a posture of prayer and how to engage with the scandalous nature of God, where he's put himself as the high priest. And he's showing that what it means to be humble before God, and that it's through that we'll be justified. See, humility sees where we stand, never forgetting the standard of compassion in the character of God himself, seen in the person of Jesus Christ. Now, when we think of this word justification, we often think of the language of Paul. But actually, it was running all through Jesus' ministry, that understanding of what it means to be justified before God. You know, when we read passages such as Romans 10:3 and Philippians 3:9, see, it's not an innovation of Paul. It actually comes from Jesus himself. Several passages are suggesting the same thing. But it's that prayer of absolute dependence on God's mercy. Don't imagine yourself justified, but rather trust, as Romans 4:2 says, but trust God who justifies the ungodly, and his faith is credited as righteous. It's divine forgiveness based on Christ's death on the cross, on our behalf as sinners, because it was Christ's death that is full payment for what we have done. It's Jesus is the one who justifies sinners by his grace. He lifts the repentant and humbles the proud. His righteousness becomes ours. Because for that tax collector, it's almost as if he is lifting his head up to saying, I see your sin and I forgive you. You are made right because you have recognized your position. Because bravado and appearance mean nothing. Resume, social status, it means nothing. Self-reliance means nothing. What counts is a heart that appreciates what God can give. The tax collector, therefore, is the one whom Jesus says goes home justified. In seeking God's forgiveness, he receives it. What a gift. What a gift, knowing the fact that it is the posture of the tax collector is what we should be mirroring. That's what we should be going after. Because the opposite position of the tax collector is pride. Because pride preaches merit. Humility pleads for compassion. Pride negotiates as an equal. Humility approaches in need. Pride separates by putting down others. Humility identifies with others, recognizing that we all have that same need. Pride destroys through its alienating self-service. Humility opens doors with its power to sympathize with the struggle we share. Pride turns up its nose. Humility offers an open and lifted up hand. Humility is something that's hard to see. It does not claim rights. It just tries to do what is right. It does not brag about integrity. It displays it. Sometimes it's easy to miss what does not point to itself. But God sees the humble heart and lifts it up in honor. That's the Jesus way. Because if I was to ask you the question, who is the Pharisee in our culture? Is the first person you're thinking of, is it yourself? Or is it thinking of someone that maybe you think is worse than you? Are we going to blame a celebrity or a political figure, divisive character, religious leaders that make us stay in order? Or actually, is it a condition of the human heart? because it comes in many packages. Proud of our achievements, and often taking down others who do less. People with high visibility. Let us not become like the Pharisee, because even thinking I'm not like the Pharisee can itself become Pharisaic, which is really frustrating. So I'm not like you, well, you just became like you. And that's kind of how it works. It's like, actually, where should your focus be? Because if I was to say, where is the tax collector in our culture? Is there anyone that comes to mind? Is there anyone you can think of right now and said, that person is a humble person? That is a person that I can see mirrors after God's own heart. That's the person that I want to be. That's the person that I know God hopes that we will be. But it starts from the position of knowing the fact the tax collector knew that he could not do it by himself, but it was utter dependence on God. It was utter dependence in recognizing his place before God as a sinner. I can't do this without you. Lord, have mercy on me. Make it right, Jesus, because I can't do it. If I'm going to level up every good deed that I've done and then mirror it up to your perfection, I am so short that the only way in which that can happen is by trusting in Jesus, who says, you are vindicated, you are justified, you are made right. So when you're thinking of those characters, the people that you want to mirror, the people you want to emulate, the people who are living this humble life, the person probably first and foremost that we should look to doing that is Jesus. When we look at his words, his conduct, the fact of how he spoke to power, the way in which he conducted himself by loving others. Because at the end of this, Jesus flips the other, because it is the tax collector who goes home justified and vindicated. God is giving us that opportunity and teaching us that the prayer and the posture of a person who understands the person they are before the Almighty and our great need for grace and mercy is seen in that image of the tax collector. Let us boldly approach recognizing our position and let him lift our head and our eyes, because we're better understood the correct way, when we've better understood the way to approach him. Let us be bold in our approach. Let us be welcomed into a closer proximity, closer to God. Because it might not be the fact that we can approach him at times because we feel that there is something that's holding us back. But inviting him to come closer is a really beautiful thing. How he wants to be able to draw near to you. He invites us in, but he also wants to come close to us as well. He doesn't want to leave us behind. He doesn't want to leave us in our pain and in our suffering. Because Luke has this theme running through his gospel. Don't know why that's turned off. The great reversal. It's an invitation to us all. Let us accept the divine forgiveness based on Christ's death on the cross. So if I'm going to go back to where we started. 2 men went into the temple to pray. One trusted his record. One trusted God's mercy. And Jesus says only one went home justified. So the real question tonight is simple. When we stand before God, which prayer will be ours? The Pharisees' prayer of, look what I've done, or the tax collector's prayer, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Coming with open hands, with a heart ready to receive him.